The alkali dust, sharp as ground glass, stung Elias's eyes as he crested the ridge. It wasn't the shimmer of heat haze that made him rein in his aging mare, Dust Devil, so hard she snorted in protest. No. It was the unnatural stillness below, then the flicker of wrongness near the skeletal remains of what was once a homesteader's foolish dream, a solitary, weathered post thrusting from the parched earth like a forgotten bone. His hand, calloused and scarred from a life that had offered little kindness, instinctively went to the Colt peacemaker holstered low on his hip. He'd seen plenty of death in his 50 years, too much of it up close in the war he never spoke of, but something about this vista, even from a distance, screamed a violation so profound it made the bile rise in his throat. He urged Dust Devil forward, the silence of the landscape pressing in, broken only by the crunch of hooves on sun-baked dirt and the creak of old leather. As he drew closer, the shape resolved itself. A girl. Not much more than a child, lashed to the post, head lolling, her pale dress torn and stained a horrific, dark crimson against the bleached wood. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, was matted with dirt and something else he refused to name. For a horrifying second, he thought she was dead. Then, a shudder, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her small frame. Alive! Barely. He was off Dust Devil before the horse had fully stopped, knife already in hand, severing the cruel ropes that bit into her wrists and ankles. She slumped forward, boneless, and he caught her, the feel of her fragile weight a sudden, unexpected shock. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow, a mere whisper of life. He saw the brand then, seared into the tender skin of her forearm, a complex, ugly symbol he didn't recognize but understood in its brutal intent. Ownership. Possession. A chilling fury, cold and sharp, pierced through the numbness that usually cocooned his heart. He gathered her into his arms, her body so light, so terribly vulnerable. The desolation around them seemed to echo the emptiness he'd carried for years, but now, a flicker of something fierce, something protective, ignited within him. He mounted, cradling her against his chest, her face hidden against his rough-spun shirt. "Hold on, little one," he murmured, his voice raspy from disuse and emotion. Just hold on. The journey back to his isolated ranch, a ramshackle collection of buildings clinging to the edge of nowhere, was a blur of grim determination. He laid her gently on his own cot, the only soft place in the cabin. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were vast pools of terror, reflecting a horror he could only imagine. He cleaned her wounds, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands more accustomed to branding irons and rifle stocks. He said little, knowing words were useless against such trauma. For days, she remained mostly silent, a ghost in his small, lonely world. He'd leave broth, water. Sometimes, he'd find it untouched. Other times, gone. He'd sit on the porch, watching the vast, empty horizon, a shotgun across his knees, listening. Listening for the sounds of pursuit he knew must surely come. What they didn't know, those who had done this, was that they had left her with a man who had nothing left to lose, and who had, in that moment of discovery, found something worth defending. The dust clouds, he knew, were gathering, still miles away, but coming. The first word she spoke was a choked whisper, days later, as he was mending a harness by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. Water. He brought it to her, his movement slow, deliberate. Her small hand, trembling, reached out, brushing his. A spark of connection, fragile as a spider's thread in a gale. He saw a flicker of something other than terror in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the dawning realization that he was not one of them. He learned her name, Lily, whispered like a secret. She would watch him, her gaze unnervingly direct at times, as if trying to see into the very core of him. He never pressed. He let the silence be, understanding its protective embrace. He'd catch her staring at his scarred hands, then quickly looking away. One evening, as the shadows lengthened and the coyotes began their mournful serenade, she spoke again, her voice still thin but laced with an undeniable urgency. "They'll come back," she said, her eyes fixed on the distant, blood-red sunset. For me, his jaw tightened. He'd known it, of course, but hearing it from her, seeing the certainty in her young face, made it a colder reality. "Who, Lily?" he asked, his voice low. Who art they? She flinched, the name of visible weight. My father, she stammered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Cyrus. Cyrus Blackwood. The name meant nothing to him, but the fear it invoked in her spoke volumes. He nodded slowly. He won't find you here. You're safe. Even as he said it, a prickle of unease ran down his spine. This was Blackwood's territory, vast and unforgiving. Sooner or later, someone would talk. Someone always did. It happened sooner than he expected. 3 riders appeared a week later, materializing out of the heat haze like malevolent spirits. They were hard men, eyes like chips of flint, guns worn with familiarity. Elias met them in the yard, his stance deceptively relaxed, his shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. Their leader, a brute with a cruel scar bisecting his face, sneered. We're looking for a girl. Run away. Property of Cyrus Blackwood. Elias's expression didn't change. No girl here. Just me. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The man's eyes narrowed, sweeping over the small cabin, lingering on the curtained window. We heard different. Heard she came this way. Hearing a things and knowing a things are 2 different roads, Elias replied, his thumb brushing the shotgun's hammer. The tension crackled, thick and heavy as summer lightning. He saw the flicker in the man's eyes, the decision to push. It was a mistake. The fight was short, brutal, and one-sided. Elias moved with a speed that belied his age, a grim efficiency born of countless desperate encounters. 2 of them went down hard. The third, the leader, wheeled his horse, clutching a bleeding arm, his face contorted with rage and surprise. He spat a curse. Blackwood will hear of this. You'll pay, old man. You'll both pay. Then he was gone, a receding figure swallowed by the dust. Elias watched him go, his chest heaving. He knew this wasn't an end, merely a postponement. He turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, her small frame trembling, but her eyes, fixed on him, held a new emotion. Awe. And a terrifying, fragile hope. The air was still, the dust settling. But everything was about to get much worse. He dragged the bodies away from the cabin, a grim task under the unforgiving sun, then set about fortifying his meager defenses. The ranch was isolated, but it wasn't a fortress. Not yet. He boarded up the smaller windows, checked his dwindling ammunition supply, his mind racing. He was one man, old and weary, against an unknown number. But the image of Lily, tied to that post, branded and broken, burned away his weariness, replacing it with a cold, hard resolve. He would not let them take her. He would not. Lily, sensing the shift in him, the grim preparation, seemed to draw strength from it. She began to help, her movements hesitant at first, then more confident. She cleaned his rifle, her small hands surprisingly deft. She brought him water, her eyes no longer holding just terror, but a fierce determination that mirrored his own. One evening, as they sat in the dim light, the silence heavy with unspoken fears, she finally began to unravel the true horror of her situation. Cyrus, she began, her voice barely a whisper, he's not just my father. He's a prophet. To them, Elias looked at her, his weathered face impassive, but his eyes intent. To who, Lily? The community of the redeemed. That's what he calls them. His followers. Her words came faster now, tumbling out as if a dam had broken. He says he speaks for God. That he knows the true path. They believe everything he says. Everything. She shuddered, pulling her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the night was warm. He told them I was special. Chosen. That I carried a blessing. Her hand went to the brand on her arm, a mark of defilement. He said it was a sign, a holy mark. But it was just to own me. To control me. The words hit Elias like a physical blow. This wasn't just a cruel man retrieving a runaway daughter. This was something far more sinister. This was a cult, built around a tyrant who used faith as a weapon. This wasn't just cruelty. This was organized evil. He wanted to make me his bride, Lily choked out, the words laced with a revulsion so profound it made Elias's blood run cold. To secure his legacy, he said. To ensure the purity of the blessing, his hand clenched into a fist. The ghosts of his past whispered insidious accusations of failures, of people he couldn't save. His wife, lost to sickness he couldn't fight. His son, taken by a war he'd tried to shield him from. He looked at Lily, at the raw pain in her young eyes, and a vow formed in the depths of his soul, hard and unshakable as granite. He would not fail again. He leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. He will not touch you again, Lily. I swear it. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose timbers of the cabin, sounding like the whispers of approaching demons. The vast, empty land suddenly felt claustrophobic, pregnant with menace. What could one man, however determined, truly do against such deep-seated, fanatical evil? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Could he truly shield this innocent child from a darkness that threatened to consume everything? He had to. There was no other choice. The dawn brought not relief, but the fulfillment of dread. A dust cloud, larger this time, a roiling brown smudge against the pale sky, announced their arrival long before the sound of hooves reached the isolated ranch. Elias watched from the narrow slit of a window, his face a grim mask. Lily stood beside him, no longer cowering, but her small hands were balled into fists, her knuckles white. He counted at least a dozen riders, maybe more, fanning out, their movements disciplined, purposeful. And at their head, a figure on a powerful black stallion, a man who radiated an aura of absolute authority even from a distance. Cyrus Blackwood. He rode with an almost regal bearing, his silver hair glinting in the early morning light. When they were within hailing distance, Blackwood raised a hand, and his men halted. He rode forward alone, stopping a mere 20 yards from the cabin. His voice, when he spoke, was not the harsh bark of a ruffian, but cultured, resonant, carrying an unnerving calm. Elias Thorne, he called out, the name rolling off his tongue as if he knew everything about the man inside. I know you are in there. I have come for what is mine. For my daughter. Lily. Elias remained silent, his shotgun steady. He would not be drawn into a parley on Blackwood's terms. Blackwood waited a moment, a small, condescending smile playing on his lips. She is misguided, old man. Confused. She needs my guidance, the love of her family. You are interfering in matters that do not concern you, matters of faith and blood. She's under my protection, Elias finally stated, his voice flat and unyielding, carrying clearly in the still air. He saw a flicker of something cold and dangerous in Blackwood's eyes. The civilized veneer was thin. Protection? Blackwood scoffed, a hint of steel entering his tone. Or captivity? You are a broken man, Thorne, hiding from the world in this desolate place. What can you possibly offer her but more fear, more isolation? Safety, Elias said, the word a rock against Blackwood's tide. A choice. Something you've never given her. Blackwood's smile vanished. His face hardened into a mask of righteous fury. You have sealed your fate, old man. He turned to his men. Bring her out. And deal with him. The assault began. Bullets thudded into the log walls of the cabin, splintering wood, showering the interior with debris. Elias returned fire with deadly accuracy, each shot carefully aimed. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but he had the advantage of cover, and a righteous anger that burned hotter than any sun. Lily, her fear a palpable thing but overridden by a desperate courage, reloaded his spare rifle, her small face smudged with gunpowder, her eyes wide but steady. Water, she'd whisper, her voice tight, and he'd nod, never taking his eyes off the swirling figures outside. Hours crawled by. The sun climbed, beating down mercilessly. The cabin became an oven. Ammunition dwindled. One of Blackwood's men, bolder than the rest, tried to rush the door under covering fire. A shot from Elias's Colt sent him sprawling. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He saw the terror, but also a flicker of something else, the raw, brutal reality of survival. The dust clouds were no longer miles away, they were at the door, choking them, blinding them. Night fell, bringing a temporary lull, but no respite. The siege was relentless. They were trapped. "They won't stop," Lily whispered in the darkness, her voice hoarse. "He never stops." Elias put a hand on her shoulder. "Neither do I," he said, the words a solemn promise in the suffocating dark. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this night would decide everything. The first grey light of dawn was a signal. Blackwood's men, sensing desperation perhaps, or simply driven by their leader's implacable will, launched their most ferocious attack yet. They came from all sides, a wave of dark figures against the pale sky, their shouts guttural and menacing. Elias moved like a phantom, from window to window, his shots precise, economical. But they were too many. He felt a searing pain in his left arm as a bullet grazed him. He gritted his teeth, ignoring it. Lily cried out, a small, choked sound. "Are you?" "I'm fine," he bit out, reloading with his good hand. Stay down. He knew he couldn't hold them off indefinitely. He needed to change the equation. He needed Blackwood. He saw his chance. A momentary lull in the firing from one side. He grabbed a kerosene lamp, lit the wick, and hurled it towards a pile of dry brush near the rickety barn. It erupted in a whoosh of flame, a sudden, bright distraction. "Blackwood!" Elias roared, his voice raw, stepping out from the cover of the cabin, his Colt leveled. "This is between you and me. Call off your dogs." Cyrus Blackwood, who had been directing his men from a slight rise, turned, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight. Surprise, then a cold, predatory smile touched his lips. He gestured, and his men, reluctantly, lowered their weapons. "So, the hermit crab emerges from his shell," Blackwood sneered, dismounting and walking towards Elias, his steps measured, confident. He stopped 10 paces away. "You are a fool, Thorn. A sentimental, broken fool. She is mine. By blood. By divine will, she's a child you've terrorized," Elias retorted, his voice tight with controlled fury. "A human being, not property. Not a vessel for your twisted ambitions. You speak of things you do not understand," Blackwood hissed, his composure finally cracking, revealing the fanatic beneath. "She is key to a new world. You would doom us all for the sake of one insignificant girl." His hand moved towards the pistol at his own belt. Elias was faster. His shot echoed the one Blackwood had intended, but found its mark. Blackwood staggered, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He clutched his chest, a dark stain blooming on his pristine white shirt. He sank to his knees, then toppled forward into the dust, his reign of terror ending in the dirt he sought to claim. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Blackwood's men, leaderless, their fanaticism suddenly extinguished with their prophet's life, looked at each other, then at Elias, then simply melted away, scattering like ashes in the wind. Elias stood there, swaying slightly, the Colt still smoking in his hand. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the throbbing pain in his arm. Then, Lily was there, running towards him, her face streaked with tears and grime. She didn't stop until she collided with him, her arms wrapping around his waist, burying her face in his shirt. "You stayed," she sobbed, the words muffled. "You stayed." He looked down at the top of her head, her moonlight hair now dull with dust, and a feeling he hadn't known in decades, something akin to warmth, spread through his chest. He gently put his good arm around her. "Always, Lily," he whispered. Always. Months later, the ranch bore the scars of the siege, but it was slowly healing. So were its 2 inhabitants. The silence was different now, not one of emptiness, but of quiet companionship. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of rose and violet, Lily turned to him, her eyes clear and bright. "Elias," she began, then hesitated. Why do you call me beautiful, cowboy?" He looked at her, truly looked at her, at the resilience in her gaze, the quiet strength that had blossomed in the face of unimaginable cruelty. A rare, small smile touched his lips. "Because you are, Lily," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Inside and out. You're a survivor. You're brave. And that kind of spirit, that's the most beautiful thing there is, she smiled back, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face and, in turn, his world. They had found something precious in the ashes of their pasts, a fragile peace, a new beginning, a family forged in fire and loyalty. A love no one else had dared to offer, in a world that had almost forgotten how. What do you think of their journey? Could you have stood against such odds for a stranger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories of courage and redemption inspire you, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell, so you don't miss our next tale.